Okay, so once in a while, we like to get really ridiculous with what it is we talk about. And this video is bringing up an idea that is just so incredibly ridiculous. But the fact is, it's coming from a source that I don't know if I want to say 100% is not reputable, because quite literally the people who brought this up initially, well, they're former NHL players. So I really think that just for the lulz, trying to just ease the nerves, let's get this video topic out there, talk about this idea over here, the meaning behind it, how ridiculous it is in my opinion, and just try to get some discussion going on, because that's kind of what this YouTube channel is about. And in the very unlikely scenario where this trade rumor is indeed something that is going to come to fruition, which I don't believe so, but in the very limited capacity that it might, we could probably say, hey, that's the topic that we talked about a few days ago. But today we're talking about the Ottawa Senators. We're also talking about the New York Rangers and the upcoming 2020 NHL Entry Draft. Now, from the title, the thumbnail, you already know what's going on here. But pretty much, our idea involves the first overall pick, which belongs to New York, the third overall pick, which belongs to the Ottawa Senators, and Ottawa Senators forward Brady Tkachuk. Take a look at our source over here. Today we're talking about Missin Curfew. This is a podcast run on Apple Podcasts, it's on Google Podcasts, and the hosts on the show are names that you actually might be familiar with. Shane O'Brien, Scottie Upshall, and Jimmy Hayes. Yeah, these guys are all former NHL athletes. As a guy who's a Vancouver fan myself, Shane O'Brien, yeah, I got memories of that guy for sure. Scottie Upshall is a guy who played 700 NHL games, and Jimmy Hayes got 35 points with the Panthers in 2014 and 29 points with the Bruins in 2015. So these are legit former NHL players over here, and what they said on the most recent podcast is where we're taking our idea from here today. This is what Jimmy Hayes, the former Panther, Blackhawk, Bruins, and Devils said, that he heard a rumor going around from a reliable source that the Ottawa Senators are trading Brady Tkachuk and the third overall pick for first overall. Meaning that they would actually end up taking Alexis Lafreniere. And right away, after I saw this post over here on Reddit talking about the idea itself, I went ahead onto Twitter and I searched up this keyword over here, Tkachuk, first overall, Ottawa, trade, etc. And I saw a whole bunch of other people on Twitter talking about this too, asking, okay, is this true? Jimmy Hayes said this on his podcast from a reputable source. Apparently this might happen. And from then on, I was like, okay, for the sake of having a lull, let's have a video about it. So, what exactly is this over here? Well, Alexis Lafreniere, he is the projected first overall pick in this 2020 NHL Entry Draft. He's been the projected first overall pick for years now. A guy who, going back to 2017-2018 when he debuted in the QMJHL for the Rimouski Oceanic, he was a very good player, even back then. He actually challenged Filip Zadina for the top rookie in the QMJHL award, and Zadina was a guy who was drafted back then in 2018. Lafreniere isn't going to be drafted until October. And because of how good he has been so far throughout the QMJHL, everybody's projecting this guy to being the next best thing. A guy who would probably be in the similar tier to an Austin Matthews, if not just a tad bit underneath him. But indeed higher than the Andrei Svechnikov we saw in 2018 and the Jack Hughes and Kaapo Kakko we saw in 2019. Lafreniere is just that good. But the problem here is that he is a winger. And the New York Rangers are a team that don't really need any more wingers, especially going into the long-term future. Pavel Buchnevich, Artemi Panarin, Kaapo Kakko, all these guys are some pretty good wingers, not to mention the guys that you have in the pipeline, Lauri Pajuniemi, Vitaly Kravtsov, etc. However, most say that the Rangers today are mostly in need of a second-line center, a guy to play behind Mika Zibanejad, because currently their second-line center, well, it's Ryan Strome. Now, don't get me wrong, Strome is good, but he's an RFA. We don't know if he's coming back. Furthermore, the next centers in line, you have Cheadle, you have Howden, but those guys are young guys. They're not really supposed to be able to take over the second line reins just yet. People have been talking about the Rangers needing a center for a while now, and what this idea here does is it sacrifices that Alexis Lafreniere first overall winger spot, and it's essentially a trade to move down to third, where you will be taking the remnants of either a Quinton Byfield or a Tim Stützle, both guys who are capable of playing center. Not to mention you have a Brady Tkachuk too, so not only do you walk away with just one winger who is a number one, probably elite player going into the long term in Tkachuk or Lafreniere, you get yourself that second line center you need too. But this is kind of where the flip side comes in, because you still have the other team's perspective to think about. The Ottawa Senators wouldn't make this trade. Straight up. No matter how much they want Alexis Lafreniere, a number one franchise game-changing left winger, they're not trading two very high-quality assets to get that. Sure, in the long term you could debate that Lafreniere is going to be a better player than Tkachuk, sure. But the third overall pick this year could be one of those guys in Stützle or Byfield who could be as elite or better than a Tkachuk. It's really similar to the discussions we had a while ago talking about whether or not the Senators would trade 3rd and 5th overall for the 1st overall pick. That's an overpayment. You're paying two very high quality assets for probably the most valuable asset in the entire National Hockey League that's not named Nathan MacKinnon. But at the end of the day, you're trading two very high-quality assets for one thing. It does not work, logistically speaking. For the Senators on this trade, what you would really be doing if you do something like this, which you're not, is sending a message that you want to build this team off of the back of a Canadian superstar in Alexis Lafreniere. You don't really believe that Brady Tkachuk has the ability to do that, which I think anybody who watches this league knows that, yeah, Tkachuk, if he wanted to be that number one leader, I think he could probably step up and be that. However, I will say, if you want to be the devil's advocate to this entire discussion, you could bring up the idea that, the Senators just have themselves another asset to give up, because what they got in that Erik Karlsson trade, which is the entire reason they're even here in 3rd overall in the first place, was so great compared to what they ended up giving to San Jose, that they can afford to do something like this. Now, that's not me defending it, that's me being the devil's advocate and providing an alternate point of view as to why somebody would believe that this would actually work. I don't believe it will, but here's the perspective. If the Senators really wanted to, they wanted to move out some money, they wanted to get the number one guy, they could do something like this and use their 5th overall pick for what would be an NHL-ready player, maybe on a guy like a Marco Rossi or something if he's still there. All of a sudden, in free agency, you go after Taylor Hall, you go after Pietrangelo, you make a trade for a goalie, you bring in some of your D-man prospects like Erik Brannstrom, all of a sudden you take Josh Norris from the NCAA, and now on the Senators, you have yourselves a team that has just unloaded in free agency. You guys got a whole bunch of quality guys, they're coming over, you got the number one overall pick in Alexis Lafreniere, and you have another NHL quality asset coming in at 5th overall. All of a sudden now, you're not really missing Brady Tkachuk all too much, but I will say that probably in the long-term future you might. So that's probably the arguing perspective here to justify this idea. I don't believe that personally, I just made the argument because devil's advocate. Because at the very end of the day, my original point still stands. Lafreniere, you're not trading two amazing pieces for one Lafreniere. That's just not how an NHL team is going to be ran. I get that Lafreniere can be good, but the guy at 3rd overall can also be really, really good depending on who you take. Byfield, Stützle, these guys have incredibly high ceilings, and everybody who has been watching this draft and paying attention kinda knows that too. So, ultimately, do I believe Jimmy Hayes, former NHL player who probably has his connections and who probably knows his way around the league, when he says that this trade is going to go down? Honestly, man, I'm sorry, I don't. I think everybody who saw this trade, even you, when you clicked on this video, you know it's a bad idea. That's why I labeled it as a ridiculous trade idea in the title over here. But it's just really crazy for me to think about all of the possibilities that people can think of when it comes to this Lafreniere pick. Because Lafreniere is the most valuable 1st overall forward, arguably since Connor McDavid. You could say Austin Matthews was there too, but you could really make the argument it's one or the other. He is that good, and he's projecting to being that good this early, and heading into the rest of his career, the sky is the limit here. So just the reality that people are talking about here, where different trade ideas are being made up and spewed out there into the media for us to indulge in, it's really interesting to think about, but not all too interesting to actually believe in. So talk to me in the comments if you're a fan of either the Rangers or the Sens, or just a fan of any other NHL team out there as well. What do you think about this? Tkachuk and 3rd overall, either a Byfield or a Stützle in exchange for Laf. Hope you enjoyed this video. So that's Troll 99, and bye.